Hello, and thank you for joining me for this edition of CMC Inclusivity Now. I am Nandita Jain, a series director, producer, and creator. We see a myriad different kind of families all around us, from different backgrounds and different makeups. So why does this diversity not get translated, or very little of it does, onto TV, books, films, games, especially on children's media? I reached out to other creators and makers to discuss this, and here we are, talking about Family Matters, an investigation into diverse and inclusive representation of families on screen. Why is it important for children to see underrepresented families on screen?
I always quote research by Dr. Rudine Bishop, and her research leans more into books, but we can actually take it and put it into children's TV and media. So in short, it's mirrors, windows and sliding doors. So the mirrors aspect is that children are able to see themselves and their families within media, TV and books. And then we have the windows. So other children can have a look through that and see, oh, there's some similarities and there's some differences. Then the sliding doors, that children can step into those worlds and see those differences.
You build empathy, you build acceptance. Like, for example, I go into schools quite a lot and I work with children, and then you say something like, oh, I don't call my mum mummy, I call my mum amma. Then they all go, oh, we call them this. And then you see that everybody is actually different, or they find the similarities in themselves and then go, oh, I do that as well. Or I go for a sleepover with my grandparents, and then it all connects, and then they go, oh, we have more in common than we have as differences.
And it helps us all grow as a society, from adults to children, because we're all getting introduced to something new. And yeah, like we're saying, just the importance of seeing yourself and seeing your family makeup, and that, yeah, feeling heard and feeling seen.
It changes people's narrative. It changes how people perceive things as well. And it's not a thing of, oh, because you're black, you do something different. No, we're all one. We are all people, sort of thing.
The things that are happening in our household, which is a household with two gay dads raising kids, could very likely happen in any household from any different family dynamic. I've just got animation back. This very funny scene in which the dad is giving his two kids a cookie, and he gives one to his toddler, and then he reaches into the cookie jar, and the cookie jar's empty, and he's like, oh no, and he quickly grabs the cookie back, breaks it in half, and tries to give it to the two kids. They both start bawling, and then he's like desperately trying to glue the cookie back together, and it's covered in toddler drool. And so I think it's fantastic if we could just look into each other's lives and see, actually, that family might have a different makeup than my own, but they still share some of the hilarious, ridiculous things that happen in my own family.
One of my recent things in terms of my leaning in and listening over the last 2 years has been the Gypsy Roma travelling community, and the discrimination that they face is absolutely heartbreaking. Lisa Smith, who works for the Travellers Times, recently, when I launched my book, My Family, Your Family, she was on the panel, and she spoke about when she was a child at school, and probably we've all had to do this. We've had to draw our homes at school, right? I remember doing it as well, and I'm very old. And Lisa said she started to draw a caravan, which was the home she was living in at the time. And she looked around at her friends, and they were all drawing a house. So she rubbed that out. And she said that was the first time that she felt that shame. So imagine then if those children were able to see what that community actually looks like.
Do you know what? It comes down to what you believe stories are for. For me, stories are about holding a mirror up to the world you live in, so you can work out how to better live in it. Do you know what I mean? That's what stories were always intended to be, were kind of guides to life. So if you exclude a whole section of people from those stories, how are you supposed to make a good judgment about how to be a good person or how to live a good life?
We all agree that it's crucial for children and adults to see all kinds of families on screen, ones they can relate to and also ones they can learn from. Why then is there such a wide gap between this reality around us and what we see on screen?
I think because the decision makers, they're generally out of touch of what's needed and what the demand is for the viewers. I feel that sometimes they go with the safest option or things that they're familiar with, what they know.
Yeah, as an audience and as somebody who creates content for kids, I think one is we need creators from all backgrounds to be able to be given the opportunity to pitch that kind of shows, to talk about, bring those shows forward, because some of those will not be obvious to somebody who always creates content the same way in many years. They're veterans and they know how to create a show, and they probably have some blind spots on all the differences that exist in the society today. The other one for me is the big one, which is public broadcast funding, right? Because not all commercial broadcasters or streamers are going to pick something that only a small they think only a small section of the population might see themselves in. Whereas all shows are for all kids, because all kids need to see all shows. But until you create that environment, public broadcasters need to take that first step.
I'm a big fan of regulation, not because it forces people to do something they don't want to do, but because it provides a level playing field for everyone, particularly when you're starting from a base level. You have to kind of you have to force the issue slightly. So encouraging is good. Regulating so there is a certain amount of representation in writers' rooms or behind the camera, I think is really useful. And I know people hate being forced to do things, and that sometimes can lead to kind of tokenistic representation. But I think over time, the more people who get the opportunity to work in that environment, things will change kind of culturally. If you're a writer who hasn't experienced disability or hasn't had a disabled parent or a disabled caregiver or a disabled family member, then it's not going to be instantly in your head to write that as natural into a show.
And I think we need to stop thinking, yes, but we've got a black TV show, we've got an Asian show, we've got an autistic show, but there are different stories. Because if you look at adults TV, quote unquote, how many police drama shows are there out there? Come on. So I think, again, we need to start thinking creatively and think, yes, it is a Black Caribbean family, but the story is completely different. Yes, it is an Asian family, but the story is completely different.
If you see only one show about a culture or about a underrepresented community or group of people, then you think that's the only way these people exist, so you don't see nuance. And the responsibility of the creators of those shows becomes much bigger, because now they are the only show that's representing a huge diaspora of a particular underrepresentation. Then means they have this huge responsibility somehow to bridge that gap and be everything to everybody. The minute you make it very, very rare, like only a few times you see it on screen, you are not representing, you are othering. So you have to show more of it to normalize it.
I also wonder if showing diverse and underrepresented families changes the way we tell our stories.
Look, as a writer working on my show, Let's Go Bananas, which has diverse families as the core of the show, it was really refreshing because suddenly there were all these new stories that hadn't been told over and over again on screen. So, for example, we've got a story about a little girl trying to organise Father's Day all by herself for her two dads, to comically disastrous results, and we've got a story about twin crocodile boys who have a solo mum but they don't have a dad, and it's Take Your Dad to School Day. So what do? They audition their friends' dads to play the part for the day. And also another underrepresented family type is the stay-at-home dad, which I think is becoming more and more familiar these days. My brother-in-law took a long time off his job at PwC to be a stay-at-home dad to his two boys. It gives us these new untapped stories, and particularly in preschool where the picnic episode where it rains or the surprise birthday party have been trodden so many times before. It's really refreshing and fun to suddenly have this new fertile ground to work with.
Our culture, we've got mixed culture of Nigerian and Ghanaian, so it's an African culture, but we do mix. We do have similar thoughts, similar ways of raising our children as well. So it came out even when Nana in the show was talking about food, and using Tree Ghanaian language to speak to Amma as well. Dad goes to work, Mum works. Dad cooks. Mum does the DIY sometimes, she does painting in the show, painting the house. We've got a lot of reverse roles within our home as well. It's not that, Mum's at home, she's cooking and, looking after the kids. Because Mum goes to work, Mum does things to the kids, so does Dad. The family getting involved with Emma's making her storybook. It was a whole family effort. It wasn't that, Mum has to help her or Nana has to help her. It was a whole family effort that everyone got involved, and it was a fun time, family bonding, and that's generally what happens within the family as well.
We didn't shy away from covering some festivals, but also using Indian words in it, showing some customs, from set design to, how we made sure even the actors who are not Indian to say those Indian words the way the family would say it. So all of that helped with creating something that is truly from an authentic source. And that is so much important because there are two things, right? One, people who are watching it for the first time this is an Asian show on screen. People who are not Asian are going to go, this is what Asian is. And for them, because it's the first show in a very long time, they're going to take whatever we do almost like, this is what it is that I'm seeing this. And then people who are Asian have to see that and not go, oh my God, this is not the way it's done. So we needed to be so much balance needed to be in it. But at the same time, as you said at the beginning, we needed to be true to the core of the show, which is the family. That is that unique family. We're telling the story of this family. We're not everything to everybody.
And what are the practical aspects of ensuring that authentic and meaningful portrayal of these families on screen?
So I've been lucky enough to work with some Simpsons writers, and it was interesting. They said to me that they were really struggling when they first started to come up with good barge stories. They had lots of good barge stories, lots of good Homer stories, but very few barge stories. They really struggled. And then miraculously, as the writers' room changed and they got more female writers into the room, they suddenly started developing barge stories. So I think, there might be something connected there.
I would think whoever is creating the show brings somebody who has that lived experience into the show in all sorts of forms, whether it is as a consultant, whether it is a writer, a director, or voice actors, to bring that in, to then therefore be completely confident that they're creating an authentic show because they are using authentic voices all across the board, and it's not just one person. Because how much ever we think we know, we don't know what we don't know.
What they did, they even came to our home, seen the foods that we ate, the spices that we used, some of our decor was used in the show, some of the pictures were used in the show, even how we make dinner, the foods that we eat. Obviously in the show we had jollof rice, chicken and salads. The kids loved that, and that's what we eat, sort of thing. So they made sure that they hit. It wasn't like a tick box thing. We've done this, done that. They really wanted to incorporate how the family are into the show, and what we generally have in the home, or, you know, how we even sit and talk in the house, how we have dinner. They made sure that they portrayed that in the show as well.
At the start, before we've even started filming, we do like a welcome day where we invite each child with their family and whoever they would like to bring. And we kind of introduce ourselves, and we introduce what kind of things that they're going to be doing. We cast these children quite early on. Us, obviously, Kanaka's very involved at the beginning with families, and we work with them in blocks throughout the season. So we do get to know them really well. You know, we're more like family friends sort of thing, that we do cast a particular episode that they might be suited to. You know, we know about their interests, we know about their hobbies, we know about kind of like what the kids are into, and, you know about their families, and, you know, any generations that might live near close by or anything like that. So, you know, it's not just come on, meet us and shoot this. They know us by name, and we're friendly faces.
Basically, we need funding that will support all storytelling, right? Even if it's not commercially viable. So that's the key. But it doesn't mean it won't be commercially viable. It can be made commercially viable. But even the opportunity to even pitch those things need to have funding, have development time to bring all of that in. I think it's the openness to telling those stories. The biggest thing is between live action and animation. I think animation funding is so small that the problem with that is then people crunch timelines, and you then don't have the nuance to tell the kind of stories you want to tell, because these stories have never been told. So it's a lot of exploration to be made, and that involves time.
I think it's just important that we give the support there. So where are we having that representation when we're having conferences, when there is an initiative coming through? How are we making sure that the commissioners, because they're the decision makers, want for a better word, have that understanding that it will work?
Change is difficult, and change is always going to be a risk. And risk is something productions need to avoid, particularly in the environment at the moment where money's super tight and nobody knows where the next show is coming from. But it's a risk worth taking, I think, because the rewards will outweigh it.
It's so wonderful to hear how these amazing creators and makers are giving the families the space and the freedom to really be who they are, as they are, and B, that freedom is supported by the environment that the families are in, as well as the people that they're working with. Thank you so much to all the wonderful creators and makers who made this session possible. And thank you for joining us today and watching.